Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. My name is Arielle Silver. This is episode 84, and this show is all about books and music. It is a almost weekly book talk and song swap with songwriters from around the world, and it's a pandemic baby. It was started just after the pandemic started, and all of the songwriters that I wanted to connect with and all of the ones that I knew I would connect with even if I didn't even know them yet, we were all flung into our corners of the world like everybody else quarantining. And of course, we missed performing live and connecting with audiences and all of that, but I really miss those backstage conversations and those conversations coming in and out of the green room and before the show and after the show, and just all that stuff, like you know like songwriters, talking shop like everybody else talks shop. And also, I love books, and naturally this show just started moving toward talking about books. So here we go, Tomes and Tunes. And yes, songwriters from around the world. This particular episode, I have someone who's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from me. Rob Waller is a founding member of See Hawks in L.A, a beloved band in Los Angeles and beyond. And it is such a thrill to have him and the rest of the Hawks actually coming onto the show over the course of the next few weeks. I can't remember who is happening when, but today is Rob Waller. That's what I know. I'm very excited to bring him onto the show. And let's see, where is he? Hey.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good, Ariel. How are you?
I am so happy to have you here, and I'm really excited. I've never done this kind of residency with a band where the band just sort of takes over the show for a while, but you guys are all songwriters, and so
We
it's
are.
it's perfect.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for having all of the Hawks on your show. It's going to be exciting to see. I wonder what everybody will say, see if we have any conflicting accounts.
Rob, I did not look this up before today's show, but a murder of crows, a flamboyance of flamingos. What is a hawk collection actually
Oh,
called?
God. That's a good question. I don't even think I know that, but we need to find that out
We
very
do need to
soon.
find that out because you
Yeah.
guys have been together for what, 15 years or something like that? More? Long
Even
time.
even even more than that. Yeah. I mean, Paul Lacques and I started writing songs together in 1999. So
Oh my gosh.
that's 23 years ago. Coming up on about 20. Yeah, I think we started writing songs together in like March or April of 1999.
So, do you remember the very first time that you wrote a song together? That you sat down to write?
Yeah, I do. I remember, so like Paul's brother Anthony and I had been in a band together called The Magic of Television in San Francisco. I had
Wait
lived
a
up in.
second. Is it called The Magic of Television, or was it called The Magic of Television in San Francisco?
It was That's a good question. It was called The Magic of Television.
Okay, because,
Um, right in L.A. in San Francisco. Gosh, I wish we would have. It's too late now. But yeah, Anthony and I were in a band together, and then we came down to Los Angeles, and we're still here for a while. And then I knew Anthony's brother Paul was in bands, and had gone to see Paul in bands. And then like Anthony and Paul and I were. It was Anthony's birthday, and we were going to Las Vegas, and we sort of decided to take a hike. We just like were on the 15 driving to Las Vegas, and we pulled off at like, and Paul's girlfriend was with us too, and we pulled off at SEMA Dome Road, which is on the 15 going to Las Vegas, and just decided to go for a hike. It was in late March, and it was at like 5 p.m. And we got totally lost, and the sun went down, and it got cold, and it like started raining, and we actually lost Paul's girlfriend, which was pretty bad. Um, Luckily, she was found
Okay.
by the
I'm
highway
like,
patrol.
I'm like, I don't want to ask any questions right now. I'm not sure where this story is going to go. Okay.
Yeah, luckily she was found by the highway patrol, not too far later. The relationship didn't survive, but we came up with the idea for the band. Someone said we should have a band called See Hawks in L.A., and the others of us said, yeah, we should. And we were committed to this idea.
That is really funny because I was wondering. I mean, it's such a bizarre. I think it's a really bizarre sounding name.
Yeah,
And I was wondering
so did we.
if you were all in agreement right from the get go, or if somebody was like, "This is a great name," and the rest of you were like, "No, that's a terrible name." And then like over the course of the next 24 hours, you all were like, wait a second, that's a brilliant name.
Over the course of the next 24 years.
But you were all immediately in agreement.
Well,
like, yeah,
but it was sort of like I mean, we thought that it had sort of a ring to it, but I think it was partly like, this is a crazy band name, let's do it. You know, like it was sort of and let's see which one of us is willing to kind of chicken out and not do it, you know. But no, we're all going to do it, right? And I mean, the idea behind the name I See Hawks in L.A., it was like sometimes people don't think about wildlife, you know, when they're in Los Angeles. And we did, you know, like, and there is a ton of wildlife in Los Angeles. There's hawks, and there's coyotes, and there's even bears sometimes coming down out of the mountains. And there's raccoons, and there's, you know, and the hawk is ancient, right? The hawk has been here the whole time. Los Angeles has only been here for, you know, whatever, 150 years or something like that, really, even less. So we were the song, first it was we had a band name, and then we had a song, and then, but it was really about, like, we felt like we wanted to do something that was kind of old and ancient in Los Angeles that was overlooked. And at the time we were really doing like, we were kind of doing like old-timey country music in the beginning, really, you know, and so the name I See Hawks in L.A., and like there's a line in the song, if you see hawks, maybe we should talk. Like, it was sort of like, this is for the small group of people who actually pays attention to, you know, and there's also just kind of the mystical kind of talisman kind of idea of the hawk, you know, in Native American culture and others. And so we kind of wanted, you know, we were thinking about it in that way too. Like, if you see a hawk, it's good, you know, it's a good sign, it's a good omen.
You know, last year, I love seeing the sunrise on January 1st and the sunset on December 31st. And in 2020, having nothing to do with sunrises and sunsets, just before it turned 2020, my sweetheart and I were in Hawaii, and we ended up encountering owls, 4 owls in a row. It turns out they're endangered owls. They are never seen at this particular place or at the particular time of day that we saw them, but we took pictures, and we consulted a Hawaiian bird expert and found out that indeed it was this owl. So at first we thought this was a wonderful omen. And then over the course of the night, as we were doing some research heading into the new year, we learned that a lot of cultures consider owls to be an omen of death. And then 2020 started, and I sort of had that in my mind, like, oh, that's so strange. Owls, you know, what's this year? What metaphorical death is this year going to hold? And then, of course, 2020 happened, and that's history. And then on New Year's Day morning, sunrise of 2021, my sweetheart and I went out to see the sunrise over the Los Angeles San Fernando Valley, and looking east and looking west. We were kind of looking in like both to see the sunrise and then to turn our backs on the sunrise and see the sunrise reflecting against the mountains. And we did see Hawks in L.A. And we, of course, by then had seen the band I See Hawks in L.A. perform. So you guys were on my mind at that particular time. But it was that morning that I just started thinking of 2021 as being the year of the hawk.
Okay.
And so last year I was thinking a lot about hawks and the symbolism of different cultures, the hawk, and they're considered to be omens of insight and great vision, and focus, you know. So I just love that story of the origin of your name. Rob, you have your guitar in your hand, so why don't we hear a song and we'll continue with the conversation in a minute.
Well, I was thinking I'd maybe play the song I See Hawks in L.A.
Perfect.
I see hawks in L.A. I see hawks in L.A. If you see hawks, maybe we should talk. I see hawks in L.A. I hear trains in the night. I hear trains in the night. Lonesome sound, lonesome as this town. I hear trains in the night. One more day on the 605. What if this place got buried alive? Biggest quake the world's ever seen. Let the snakes take over again. You watch clouds disappear. You watch clouds disappear. If clouds disappear, a land you are near, you watch clouds disappear. Just as I'm about to leave this town, clouds roll in and the rain comes down. Just enough to make me laugh. Big tree makes the sidewalks crack. I see hawks in L.A. 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 Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so nice. Oh, you know, I just couldn't help but feel like this sense of almost like an exhale. Like that song just felt like like just slow down, settle in. Just reminded me of that scene that I was just describing before of watching the hawk over the first morning of the year last year.
Yes, I mean, You know, like the big tree makes the sidewalk crack. You know, just like, and that, you know, that was a song Paul, you know, Paul Lacques. You can talk to Paul about that. He sort of came up with that one, you know, right after we had this idea about, you know, having this band. Um, and I think it is sort of a meditation on that. I mean, there's part of Los Angeles is you're kind of always waiting for the giant earthquake to swallow it up and drop it into the ocean. You know, there is sort of this apocalyptic feeling to Los Angeles. There's always this idea somehow that this place is temporary. You know, that this city isn't gonna last forever. But there's something, you know, that can be scary, but it can also be kind of like, you know, kind of a blessing. You know, it's like when things do come back, when let the snakes take over again. You know, at some point, you know, this is all gonna change. You know, this is all gonna be wilderness again.
Yeah. Where are you from originally?
Originally, I grew up in Minnesota.
Okay. So
I
Midwest.
grew up in Minnesota, and I went to college in North Carolina, and then came to California. After that, my family is all from like Tennessee and Mississippi, so most of my like I don't really feel like a Minnesotan. I was, you know, I was the sort of child of transplanted Southerners,
Yeah.
in Minnesota. So like you know, it's like
Huh.
it's like everyone spoke a different language in my house. You know, I like we were northern. We weren't really northerners, but I did grow up there. You know, I did grow up there. I was born there, but I don't feel like I never really felt like I was a Minnesotan. I felt like I was you know, I was someone from Memphis who was living in Minnesota.
Yeah. Um, I want to say first, thank you, Jimmy, for letting me know that my volume is lower. I thought it was. I'm not hearing myself that well. I thought it was just on my end. So, Jimmy, let me know if this is sounding a little better. I feel like for some reason, just a technical thing, I feel like my tech for some reason is not as awesome as it usually is. So there we have it. Jimmy, let me know if this is sounding better. Um, and Rob, I can relate to what you just said about where you're from doesn't really feel like where you're from somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the South, and my folks were transplants from the North,
Mm-hmm.
on the East Coast, and I don't feel like a I don't feel like a Yankee, but I don't feel like a Southerner either. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit of both. Like I feel like first meals really for me say something about where you're from. Like the
Mm-hmm.
first meals I remember are catfish and hush puppies and fried chicken,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a vegetarian now, so I'm kind of cringing
Yeah.
as I say these things, but but still like southern food, but also my family's Jewish, so also like matzo ball soup and kugel and
Yeah.
things like that,
Yeah.
you know. But there's a weird feeling in me. I recognize that some people associate the word home as being where they are actually from, but I've
Mm-hmm.
come to think recently that home for a lot of us is not where we're from, but either where we're going or where we have gotten to, depending on our journey and where we are in it. Um, there's something about maybe what you're saying about when your family is from a different place than where you're from. There's always a little bit of a exile feeling there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I totally, I get that, and feel the same way. The thing that to me, you know, has sort of as I've grown older, and you know, like my mom passed away, you know, 6 years ago, and the place where your aunt now, and my mom's buried in Memphis, and like I go to this cemetery to visit my mom, and like her mom is on the same hill, and her dad's on the same hill, and my uncle's on the hill, and you know, like all of these
Mm.
people are buried, and it's like to me now the thing that makes, and I feel at home there. You know, it's like
Mm.
the ancestral home is like the place where everybody's buried.
Right, but
Like,
what about for those of us who maybe I mean, gosh, that's so crazy because I was back east in New York for my great aunt's funeral a few
Hmm.
years ago, just before the pandemic, and there is that cemetery where the people on my mom's side are, that lineage, it's like all the graves are there. But there are a lot of people. I mean, I wonder if part of the reason I feel unrooted is, kind of has to do with my Jewish background and like the constant exile of my people, and
Yeah.
I also think about people whose ancestral background is Africa, for example, and they were
Hmm.
kidnapped and enslaved here, or
Hmm.
any numbers of other people who are refugees, or all kinds of people who have had to leave. That's an interesting idea that maybe there's this like epigenetic thing that's being passed on once people have been uprooted. Maybe there's always that sense of uprootedness. Maybe.
Yeah, or unless like some people stay in the same spot forever,
Yeah.
right? And their parents were there, and their grandparents were there, and their grandparents were there. I mean, in America, it doesn't happen as often, but
Yeah.
there's certainly places where families have lived in the same town or area for
For
100
sure.
years,
Yeah.
150 years, 200 years. Um, I mean, I think, yeah, lots of at the time we're on the move, and going somewhere different and starting a new life for
Yeah.
good or bad reasons. Um, but I do think, I don't know, maybe in history, lots of times you were the land that you grew up on, you stayed there. You
Yeah.
didn't go anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, Rob, so wait, did you say Memphis is where that hill is that you were talking about?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so when you die, are you going to Memphis?
It's a good question. I haven't. I mean, I honestly haven't thought about it yet, but um,
Hmm.
which is interesting that I haven't thought about it yet. But it's certainly a possibility. It's like, why not? I mean, I guess it's a very good. It's a powerful question. That's it's a very powerful question. I don't know that I want to be buried. You know, I've
Oh,
never
oh,
really,
right.
I've never really wanted to be buried.
Right.
So like, but if I was to be buried, I think that's probably what I can't imagine I would do it anywhere else. I'm certainly not going to do it in Los Angeles or Minnesota. You know, um, I don't think either of those places I would want to be buried.
Hmm.
It would probably be Memphis. Yeah,
Wow.
I think that's right. How about you?
I don't.
Where would, yeah. Have you ever thought about it?
Oh, gosh. I've been thinking about death since I was born.
Really? I mean, it's funny because I love thinking about death and talking about death, and yet I've never considered where my earthly remains would reside. Never
Yeah.
thought about it.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
it's cool.
I think part of the reason I have been thinking about it for so long is because it is, I mean, I was raised, I should say, in a pretty religious household, and
Hmm.
that is not my daily practice now, but just all of the rituals and traditions and stories and Judaism has a prescription for everything, has a
Yeah.
ritual for everything, there's a lot of room in, at least in the flavor of Judaism that I was raised in, there's a lot of room for questions and exploration and inquiry,
Yeah.
but there's also, it's like you're allowed to have all of those philosophical and intellectual questions, and you don't have to worry about, like, what do you do in the morning when you wake up, or what do you do when you go to sleep, or what are you going to do when you die? Like, all of those questions are handled.
Yeah.
So it's like so it's like when you die, this is what happens. And just because I was born in the South to Northerners and have lived in a lot of different places and traveled around, and now I'm in LA. I
Yeah.
don't know. I feel like it's um, unearthed questions that historically in my family's background, those questions wouldn't even be asked.
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh
It
yeah,
would
we're
just
all going to be buried in this particular cemetery. And now I'm like, well, I don't really know. So I haven't
yeah.
answered the question, but I've asked it many times.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before there would just it would just the automatic system would go into operation and
Totally. Yeah.
take care of these things.
It's a
Yeah.
conveyor belt, you know? You
Yeah.
know, you can do what you want while you're on the conveyor belt, but this is, this is what happens when you're born, and this is what happens when you die.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that like moving to Los Angeles, lots of people move here, right? Lots of people move here from different places on their own,
Mm-hmm.
usually without their families,
Yeah.
often in pursuit of some kind of creative dream, whether
Yeah.
it's music or acting or films or television or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And they're disconnected from
Yeah.
that, maybe very much on purpose.
Yeah.
But I think I purposefully went to like as far away from home as I could when I was 22 years old. I wanted to.
Yeah.
But now I don't know. It's like, whoa, I don't. But we're I know you are a yoga teacher, and I think yoga is like there we find and music, we find these different communities that aren't necessarily our familial and ancestral communities, but they're very important and rich, but they don't have the ancient tradition, the ancient rituals as much.
Yeah. Big questions here on Tums and Tunes today.
Big ones.
Wait, so I want to kind of put a dog ear on this particular chapter, and maybe come back to it today or another time. But I'm still I'm still finding myself thinking about that day that the girlfriend got lost, and someone saw Hawks, and I See Hawks in L.A. was born. Was that hike on the way to Vegas the songwriting, the first songwriting episode?
That was not the first songwriting episode. That was the conceptual birth of the band. And
Did you write that day? Had you already written? Were you birthing a band because you had already started the relationship of co-writing together, or you started the band and then you said, okay, now we got to write a song?
That's right. Now we got to write a song. Now we have to write a song. So yeah, it was the concept, and it was the concept of this crazy name and this sort of dare. I definitely think that that's part of the root of the Hawks, is sort of daring each other to do stuff. And then
I'm a big fan of double dog dares. Yeah, totally.
And then it's like, okay, all right, well, let's see if you'll do this. Okay, I'll do it. But that, so we came up with this concept, and we, it was like made our blood oath to the concept at the time. And then we started, and Paul Lacques had an apartment on Kensington in Echo Park. A single bachelor apartment. He's, you'll see Paul and Victoria are married now, so that's a much different, that's
their story to tell, right?
That's their story to tell.
In subsequent weeks on this show.
Exactly. I'm foreshadowing what's to come. But yeah, so I remember I went over to Paul's apartment, and just like a little, like 2-room apartment on Kensington, and like one of those, it was like an old Victorian house in Echo Park that had been kind of broken up into like 5 or 6 apartments. And we started swapping songs, and I played him a couple songs, he played me a couple songs, and then we started to try to write some, and did, and had a pretty good writing relationship, I think, really from the very beginning, and kind of I don't know if it was easy, but it was effective. It was like productive. We've written a lot of songs, in the last 20 some years. 10 records. We've made 10 records, and we've made 3 records in the last 4 years. We've made even more of the pace, but yeah, that was the first. That was when we first started writing.
Had you written songs with people before? Were you already a seasoned co-writer, or was this sort of a new venture to move from solo writing to collaborative work?
I definitely written with bands. Like I was like being in bands. There's sort of like when a band writes a song, and like um, the bass player and the drummer come up with something, and the guitar player adds something, and I was always the lead singer. I was the lead. That was my job in the band. I was the lead singer, so I'd write words and lyrics and melodies. But I think with the Hawks, it was more like two people, like in the beginning especially. But it was like Paul and I, and Anthony too. Anthony, Paul's brother, who's the original drummer for the Hawks. It was the three of us would do it, or in different combinations. Paul and Anthony, me and Paul. But it was more like partner writing a lot more of the time. Which the Hawks still kind of do, although we have some songs that we've written as a band, and then we've had like more individually led songs as well. But I do think that was the beginning of me writing in sort of a songwriting partnership. Yeah. Just me and one other person.
Yeah, it's kind of a magical thing, what you're describing.
It's an intense relationship. I mean, it was fun to watch, the recent Beatles documentary. I don't know if you watched that.
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, it's so good. But like watching, McCartney and Lennon write songs together, and watching them, and you get to watch them come up with these songs, these songs that you've heard your whole life. You get to see them invent the songs, because it's 6 hours long. And they're just shooting footage of them messing around, goofing around in the studio, coming up with ideas. And I mean, that's definitely, a similar to how we do it. It's like some of it is just playful. There's a playfulness to it, especially when there's a band involved. I think it has to be. It's fun. It's definitely a goof. But it can also be very serious.
You and I have this bizarre connection, which we just discovered before the show started in the virtual green room, right? Yes. You teach at USC, and I teach at Antioch University, and the course, one of the courses that we teach is very, very similar, and we realized in the green room that the reason it's so similar, I mean, it's kind of uncannily similar. I've never heard of another person teaching this kind of course where it's all about creativity, and the people in the course, the students, are coming from all different disciplines: dance, music, theater, acting, fashion, whatever. I have never heard of actually, I have heard of one other course like this taught by Linda Barry, the graphic novelist. Okay. And anyway, we found in this roundabout way that your course and my course sort of, the parent is the same person.
Yes.
And
hi Kaylee.
Hi Kaylee. Shout out to Kaylee O'Dwyer. So I was reading your bio on your personal website, or your music website, but not the IC Hawks website. And and in that you said that your students, it was teaching that class that inspired you to record your solo album. Is that your most recent solo album? And it was
I've only done one.
Okay. I also share that source of inspiration because for years, coming from my yoga teacher training and teaching yoga, and then being very interested in creativity and circuitous path, but eventually started leading yoga retreats with my sweetheart. They're called Create and Flow, and there's like an exploration of creativity and the creative spirit that is part of these retreats. And after leading these retreats for a few years, that was when I came back to music and came back to songwriting. And I'm kind of curious. I really feel for myself that talking with others about their own creative process is what led me back to my own creative process in music. How did that work with you and your students? How did they inspire your project?
Well, I think it was so like, we were just talking about like songwriting and and bands and songwriting partnerships and stuff. Yeah. And one of the things that I wanted to do, like with my solo albums, I wanted to just sing. I just wanted to sing. I didn't want to write the songs, and I wanted to just do other people's songs. And I mean, and that was like a kind of a unusual choice, for me to make. And but it gave me the opportunity to sort of experiment with songs and experiment with instruments and experiment with genres of singing that I hadn't done before. So it was a very experimental project for me. And I think that the way that sort of came from my students is like most of my students are like around 20 years old, or they're 21 or they're 22, or maybe they're a little bit older and they've come back to school, but like they're in the early stages of their creative process, and they do stuff like that they're not comfortable with kind of all the time, because that's the nature of getting started on any creative pursuit.
Yeah, that's learning.
That's learning.
That's learning. Yeah.
And like a lot of my students are great musicians. I have amazing musicians, and some of them played on that, I had them play on this record, Nora Germain is a great violinist who played on my solo record a bunch. And it was like, I think that when you're teaching and when you're with, young people, and I definitely feed off their creative energy and their commitment and their vision, and it renews my my spirit to do it, like it's like, okay. And it is, thinking about this whole daring someone
that's
to do
exactly
it.
what I was thinking about. Yeah.
It's like, come on, like, are you gonna do it? Like I make all my students, perform in class.
Yeah.
Or share their work. Some of it's performing, and some of it's like sharing visual art or whatever their particular art form is.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, that's a pretty scary thing. Not all of some of them are super experienced, and it's like no sweat, to do it. But for some of them, it's maybe it's nerve wracking. It's like, okay, I have to perform for all these other people, and they're all really talented. And what am I going to do? And what am I going to say about it? It's like. And they'll come talk to me, and it's like I make them do it, and like sometimes, like with some of it, I was like, I have to do it too, like I have to go and like try to do something new, and try to do something that I'm not comfortable with, because you have to, It's part of the obligation, I think, of to your creative spirit, to not just do the things that you're comfortable with. And it really helps me to be in a band, and it helps me to write with other people. And I've always have been. I have been since I was young. So I'm comfortable in that way, and I have my friends to go up and do it with me. But like to go up and do it by myself is super uncomfortable for me. So I had to force myself to do that.
So
and they definitely inspired me to.
You're kind of like, I dare you, and then you're like, ooh, if I'm daring them, even if they're not gonna say it to me, it's sort of an unspoken, I'm rubber, you're glue, like, bounce it back to you. Like, you dare me? Okay, I dare you.
Yeah, and you're engaged in it together, like you're sort of, everybody's trying to do their own thing in whatever that may be, but it's, one person walks the tightrope, and then you have to try to do it too. Yeah.
Do you perform when you ask your students to perform? Do you perform for them?
I usually do. Yeah, and like I don't always, and sometimes I don't. But if they ask me to, I do, and often they do. Or they ask me, they'd be like, "We all presented. You have to present your stuff now." I'd be like, "Okay," Sometimes I'm able to escape the responsibility.
Okay, Rob. So this is Tomes and Tunes, and we've been talking about music, and it's so awesome.
Yes.
And I could keep talking about this for a long time with you, but I'm very curious about what you like to read, what you're reading now. What do you read? You like books. You teach college.
I like books.
Yeah.
I like
you
books.
have a MFA.
I do. So I just sort of finished the Cormac McCarthy Border trilogy, which is, Cormac McCarthy. This is like a really westerns, it's kind of they're 3 books, and they're about, they're all about the border between like Texas and New Mexico and Mexico, And, you know, the first book is All the Pretty Horses, which is probably the most famous of the three books. And there was a movie made, I think, with like Robert Redford or something. And it's about like this, you know, this kind of young man who's like an expert with horses. You know, he's amazing. And it takes place sort of like right kind of before and sort of after World War II. And it's his story. And then the second story is about this like young man who's sort of living he's like 15 or 16, and he's living with his parents in a, you know, very poor farm right on the border, just across the border in Texas. And like he wants to go to, you know, like he just wants to go to Mexico, you know, to kind of check it out, you know. And he kind of sneaks away and like goes down to Mexico, and he's down there for a while, has some adventures, and then he comes back and his family's been killed. His parents have been killed. And his brother is missing. He has like a younger brother, so he like has to like find his brother. His brother is gone, and he has to like go back and forth to Mexico. And then the third book, these two guys together, like from the character from the first book, the character from the second book, or it's after the war, and they're both sort of working on this ranch together as like the American West frontier is sort of changing and closing and modernizing. Like it's after the war, and these big ranches that have been there for a long time are getting cut up, and their jobs that these guys have done as cowboys are kind of going away. It's not really happening anymore. But the guy who's has the horses, who's the horse expert, he falls in love with an epileptic prostitute in Mexico, and he wants to get married to her, and the pimp who does not want that to happen. And there's a lot of, I mean, I don't know if I want to give it away, but there's a lot of blood is spilled.
Blood is spilled.
Blood is spilled as a result of that. But Cormac McCarthy, I like Cormac McCarthy a lot. I've read a lot of Cormac McCarthy, and I mean, it's just so much of it is pretty brutal. It's like just like the brutal nature of life, and that it always ends tragically and with a lot of bloodshed. So there's that. Okay, so I'm reading that. I just finished those three. I also was just reading like a history of Custer's last stand in you know, at Little Bighorn. That's pretty cool. You know, learning a lot about Custer and what that whole story was about. I didn't know that like Custer was really trying to become president, and like he was sort of going to try to win a battle like before like the you know, Republican convention, to try to just get attention. And he, you know, they had like journalists embedded in the armed forces, you know, as we had in, you know, the Iraq War and stuff. Journalists embedded who were like reporting with him from it, and he really kind of had no business doing what he did. And it was, you know, of course, driven by pride and hubris. But he was also just trying to make a big splash so that he could become the nominee for the party. He's incredibly ambitious, and that's what he was trying to do. I'm also reading some other fiction.
I do this too. I have like, you know, 4 books happening right now. So yeah, this is great.
Then there's Donna Tartt. I don't know if you've read any Donna Tartt. She wrote The Goldfinch.
That's right. Yeah.
Which was a movie, which is a great story, and I read that. And then she has the story The Secret Friend, which is sort of about a girl in the South, and totally different. The Goldfinch is about like a boy whose mother, you know, there's a terrorist attack at the Met in New York City, and his mom gets killed, and then he gets this. He survives, but he runs away with this priceless artwork, this painting of the goldfinch. And then all this stuff happens in his life because he possesses this priceless artwork. But now I'm reading a different book by her called The Secret History, which is sort of about like, it's kind of a murder story about that takes place in like an eccentric East Coast college. Of kind of corrupt elite people.
I see a theme of blood crossing.
I guess so.
Across all of these.
I think
but
so.
That's a great reading list, though. that's a great reason. Do you have a I know I threw this to you at the last minute just before we went live. Do you have a passage or anything that you'd like to share? Ooh, change of glasses.
Yeah, I gotta change the
So,
glasses. I mean,
toss.
I'll read you the very beginning of The Secret History, which is this book that I just started. That which is a Donna Tartt book. It's about the elitist, the corrupt elite people in Vermont. Well, it's the boy is from like it's this boy from Cal. It's this sort of like our connected to our sort of growing up in different or existing in different places than you grew up. So it's this elite Vermont institution, and this guy from California who doesn't have a lot of money has sort of snuck his way into it, and gets involved with these kind of weird, corrupt people who are studying like Greek and Roman and the classics and stuff. So this is the beginning. The beginning of Donna Tartt's The Secret History. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. He'd been dead for 10 days before they found him, you know. It was one of the biggest manhunts in Vermont history. State troopers, the FBI, even an Army helicopter. The college closed, the dye factory in Hamden shut down, people coming from New Hampshire, upstate New York, as far away as Boston. It is difficult to believe that Henry's modest plan could have worked so well, despite these unforeseen events. We hadn't intended to hide the body where it couldn't be found. In fact, we hadn't hidden it at all, but had simply left it where it fell, in hopes that some luckless passerby would stumble over it before anyone even noticed he was missing. This was a tale that told itself simply and well. The loose rocks, the body at the bottom of the ravine with a clean break in the neck, and the muddy skid marks of dug-in heels pointing the way down. A hiking accident, no more, no less, and it might have been left at that, at quiet tears and a small funeral, had it not been for the snow that fell that night. It covered him without a trace, and 10 days later, when the thaw finally came, the state troopers and the FBI and the searchers from the town all saw that they had been walking back and forth over his body until the snow above it was packed down like ice. That's just the beginning sort of passage. What happened? And somehow this narrator that we're gonna get to know over the course of this, somehow they murdered a friend of theirs, and we're not sure why, and we're gonna find out over the course of the book what led them to do this this terrible thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am currently reading David Whyte, Whyte.
Okay.
I think of him as a poet, but I'm reading his book-length essay called "The Three Marriages." I'm trying to remember the subtitle, but it's something to the effect of the relationship between you and another human, you and your vocation, and you and yourself. And it's a really, really wonderful, very nuanced, essayistic exploration of all of these things and the vows that we take to them all. And he says that we are avowed to them, whether we're conscious of that or not, to our other person, to ourself, and to our vocation. And it's wonderful. Each section has its own conclusion, its own implications, and a lot of anecdotes. So I'm really enjoying that. I'm also reading Rebecca Solnit's A Field Guide to Getting Lost, which, I guess, in such a meta way, that the book has just taken me down paths and kind of falling into various abysses along the way and then pulling myself back out. And it's wonderful, and she's brilliant. I'm also reading, I don't typically like to read celebrity memoir because I find that they don't typically appeal to my appreciation of literary writing and like personal inquiry. They're more often, just a recital of the facts. This is the story of my life, and we all want to be seen, and so I understand the compulsion to write a book like that, but it's just not that interesting for me to read. That said, I've read a number of them recently. I read
Okay.
Mary Gaucher's Saved by a Song. I read Jules' Never Broken, and two Audible short-length things, one by Sheryl Crow and one by Alanis Morissette. And now I'm reading Brandi Carlile's new memoir. I think it just came out this year. My younger step-kidlet gave me it for Christmas.
Cool.
It's called Broken Horses by Brandi Carlile. So, reading those, and just really wanted to do a dive into women songwriters, and like felt like I kind of needed to hear how my how my kind of the ones who came before me, like how they have pulled themselves out of hard times, or how they've navigated the path of doing this. But I just started this one last night, Bewilderment by Richard Powers. Let's see if I can get the reflection out of there.
Okay.
He has a book that came out a while back called The Overstory, which is about trees.
I read that book.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a new one called Bewilderment.
It's funny. I almost chose that. I almost chose the Overstory to read from. That would have been funny.
I really liked so much of the writing of it, and I liked so much about it. And then there were some things that I'm not prepared to talk about it right now, but
Yeah.
there were just elements of the book that frustrated me, I think.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it was weird. I was sort of like, it took me a long time to get into it, but
Yeah.
I kept like forcing. I was just like, there's got to be something to this, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it changed in the beginning. It's like wildly different, you know, people
Yeah.
who eventually come together. But yeah, I was frustrated by it. But then I liked it for a while, and then I sort of was like, what?
Yeah. You know, I think what I didn't in the end, what I didn't like about the book was the ambivalence that I think he had, meaning he was arguing for different, like, at cross purposes, and I think that was the point of the book. You know, all the characters were unlikable in many ways, and I don't believe that I have to like characters necessarily. I don't like a lot of humans, you know, or I like them. I mean, I like the same people that I don't like, you know, like.
Well, it's a misanthropic book, I think.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
it is.
I think
yeah.
the whole idea is that people are
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a
and
very
need to
good
go
point.
away. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? I loved the opening of that book. I loved
Yeah.
the chestnut story.
Totally.
That was my favorite.
And then when it switched gears to a totally different place, I was like, why? I loved that whole thing.
Yeah.
The flip book of the growing trees, that was great.
Yeah, yes, totally. That was great. I forgot about that part. Yeah, you're right. It was misanthropic. And actually, I think that
the hero commits suicide, you know?
Yeah, and
Like
I think a lot of the characters were actually quite flat. It was the nature, it was the trees that were very complex, and the humans that were complex enough for him to get away with in a book.
Yeah, the trees are the heroes.
But the trees are the real heroes. But anyway, so I picked this up. I was at the library for something, and I have you used to work at a library, is that right?
Yeah, I worked at the L.A. Public Library, Los Feliz branch.
Oh, well, I haven't been to the library during this whole pandemic time. I just didn't want to be around people and didn't want to touch their things. But I found myself at the library kind of recently, and now I've gotten back into borrowing books from the library. And this one, Bewilderment by Richard Powers, was on the shelf, and I just want to share this passage if I can find it. I just started it last night. Let's see here. We'll try this. I never believed the diagnoses the doctors settled on my son. When a condition gets 3 different names over as many decades, when it requires 2 subcategories to account for completely contradictory symptoms, when it goes from non-existent to the country's most commonly diagnosed childhood disorder in the course of 1 generation, when 2 different physicians want to prescribe 3 different medications, there's something wrong. And then I'm going to skip to a few paragraphs later. On rough nights when Robin retreated to my bed, he wanted to be on the side farthest from the endless terrors outside the window. His mother had always wanted the safe side too. He daydreamed, had trouble with deadlines, and yes, he refused to focus on things that didn't interest him. But he never fidgeted or dashed around or talked without stopping, and he could hold still for hours with things he loved. Tell me what deficit matched up with all that, what disorder explained him. The suggestions were plentiful, including syndromes linked to the billion pounds of toxins sprayed on the country's food supply each year. His second pediatrician was keen to put Robin on the spectrum. I wanted to tell the man that everyone alive on this fluke little planet was on the spectrum. That's what a spectrum is. I wanted to tell the man that life itself is a spectrum disorder, where each of us vibrated at some unique frequency in the continuous rainbow. Then I wanted to punch him. I suppose there's a name for that too. Oddly enough, there's no name in the DSM for the compulsion to diagnose people. When his school suspended Robin for 2 days and put their own doctors on the case, I felt like the last reactionary throwback. What was there to explain? Synthetic clothing gave him hideous eczema? His classmates harassed him for not understanding their vicious gossip. His mother was crushed to death when he was 7. His beloved dog died of confusion a few months later. What more reason for disturbed behavior did any doctor need? Watching medicine fail my child, I developed a crackpot theory. Life is something we need to stop correcting. My boy was a pocket universe I could never hope to fathom. Every one of us is an experiment, and we don't even know what the experiment is testing. My wife would have known how to talk to the doctors. Nobody's perfect, she liked to say. But man, we all fall short so beautifully.
Yes.
So.
What do you like? What do you like about it?
I like the language. I like the simplicity of the language, but the complex of ideas.
That's always the trick.
Yeah, it is. And I really, especially coming out of reading these celebrity memoirs, whose stories I'm really enjoying, for sure. And I'm getting a lot out of them, but I really am missing just lovely language, which is a little bit surprising, I think, from songwriters, that I'm not getting that. But they're songwriters of all different types as well, I guess, these people that I'm reading. So Rebecca Solnit and David White are giving me lovely language, but both of those books are nonfiction. They're both essays. So there's just a delight in fiction, another world, other people unknown, and an emotional truth, philosophical truth that emerges. So that's what I'm liking so far about this.
Yeah, I always tell my students, you want to have a complex idea expressed simply, not a simple idea expressed complexly.
Right. Oh my gosh. Oh boy.
Because we did a lot of that.
Having just come out of the fall quarter where students were like, how long should the paper be? 10 pages? Okay, let me make this simple idea. Yeah. Let me put it in the passive voice with as many adjectives as I can manage. See if I can stretch that out to two pages instead of a half a paragraph.
Yeah, that powers one that I like that idea about, things being overdiagnosed. I think that that's a cultural problem that it doesn't mean the diagnoses aren't real necessarily, but that's I think that the expectation is, once I have the correct diagnosis, that defines me. Yes. And I can address it, and then fix it, and then that's done, because there's this flaw that I need to correct. But I don't think that is the whole story with human beings.
I think that words are I think that words can be the greatest, most positive superpower, and also the greatest hindrance. It's like, is a room providing safety and security, or is it a prison? It's all perspective, and how can we use the superpower for good? And diagnoses, I feel like I'm at this point in my life, and I don't know that I don't know that my younger self agrees with this, but at this point in my life, I'm grateful that I I'm grateful for all the diagnoses I have not been given. You know, I'm grateful for all the words and all the labels that have not been placed on me, because
Yeah.
I have had to navigate life either way. And you know, yes, we are all on a spectrum, and so we all have to, you know, figure out how to get along and connect with our fellow humans, and you know, live on this planet. You know, whether there's a word put to our particular way of moving through the world or not. So yeah.
And that there are, you know, like I mean, there's a writer's written. There's a book called Neurotribes, which is about it's about autism and about like kind of neurodiversity and all. You know, they're like yes, there's a spectrum. Yes, these things exist, but like it's kind of also thinking about all the different ways that those are valuable and that people can make contributions in all kinds of ways. I think sometimes there's an assumption that the diagnosis is a problem that
It
has
can be
to be
reductive.
fixed.
Yeah, yeah. Have you read the book? It's come up on this show a few times, and I read it because of that, and also because another friend recommended it. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
No, I don't know that book.
It's a fantastic book written by a trauma therapist in the Boston area, and he's very interested in exploring all different types of treatment to help his patients. And his trauma patients some of them are coming from adult trauma, like a natural disaster and war, and others are adults who have been living with childhood trauma. And he explores neuroscience and, you know, all the way to expressive therapies and the role of theater and yoga and breathing and
Cool.
you know, meditation. And I found it to be a phenomenal book, both just intellectually interesting and also personally helpful.
Okay.
But he's sort of a huge piece of the book is sort of an argument against the DSM, and I got more insight into the making of the DSM and the integration of certain diagnoses and certain labels in the DSM than I had ever gotten before. So anyway, Rob, I promised you that we were going to keep this show to an hour, and we're already at the hour mark, but we got to do music. So will you play another song?
Sure,
And then I'll just take us out on a song and we'll go on. But you see these conversations, it's so great.
Yes, it's fantastic. Okay, I'll play a song that's sort of inspired by. There's a place we've played in Northern Ireland a few times that it's called the Bronte Center, and it's a church where the Bronte sisters lived, and their dad was the minister, and now they have shows and all kinds of other cultural programming. It's a beautiful place, a beautiful church on a hill in Northern Ireland, and with a cemetery around it. And this is a song called "Singing in the Wind." Visit graves when I go to the country. Churches haunted, desanctified, mossy tombstones falling over. Want to read or shed a tear for well-worn hearts, angel wings. I love to hear the willow sing. Singing in the wind, singing in the wind. Corn crakes flee the stinging rain over stones of grease and black dots. Hungry Heathcliff, Catherine and Edgar still walk the moors unsatisfied. All that trouble, all that worry, the old cold turf Singing in the wind, singing in the wind, singing in the wind. In dreams I walk the hills around, old drum falling rolling, whispers of the lonely. Ooh, ooh, ooh. All that trouble, all that worry, the old cold turn cools the fury, singing in the wind, singing in the wind, singing in the wind, singing in the wind. All right.
I love that. When was the last time you were in Northern Ireland?
That would be 2018. 2018, I think. I think that was the last time we were there.
You think you guys will go back?
I hope so. There was talk about going, this summer. We'll see. We'll see what's going on.
Yeah.
We'd love to get back over there. We go that we went there like every other year for quite a while. Hopefully we get back.
Yeah. Is that song on one of the albums?
Yes, that is on Live and Never Learn,
Live and Never Learn.
which is the 2017 album.
It's very singable. I was over here singing along with you, and then I remember
Great.
I'm on camera and I'm like, I look goofy, but yeah. Thank you. I guess I'll just take us out with a song, and
Great.
and there we go. This is a song inspired by my old home in New Jersey that I lived in as a kid for a few years. We had wild blackberries growing in the woods around our house. Our home was in the woods on a mountain. There was a lake behind it, and we were just
Nice.
surrounded by trees, and we had some wild fruit, the blackberries and some other things out there. So this is a song called Bramble Vine.
Okay.
Blackberries grew in the thicket north of our yard. In summer we'd pick 'em and come home with stickers and thorns in our arms. Some hours later, when supper was plated and served, barely remember the pain for the pleasure that went into making dessert. And some kinds of love's like that, sweetness buried in a thorny patch, a bramble vine heating time for my heart from the scraps, like making pie from scratch. Some kinds of loves like that. Someone once showed me the best way to work with the dough. just a few presses. You crimp down the edges, then squeak the old oven door closed. Finding a balance to strike between effort and ease requires some practice, a delicate lattice. You learn it degree by degree. And some kinds of love's like that. Sweetness buried in a thorny patch. The bramble vine keeping time for my heart from the scraps. Like making pie from scratch. Some kinds of loves like that. Ooh, 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 no. Ooh, 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 ooh. Some kinds of loves like that. Sweetness buried in a thorny patch. The bramble vine keeping time for my heart from the scraps. Like making pie from scratch. Some kinds of loves like that.
Right. Beautiful.
Thank you. So short and sweet, like
That's great.
pie.
Yes. I want a piece of pie now.
I know. Well, you should have a piece of pie now.
I think I deserve. Yeah, I'm gonna go get one.
After being on this show, Rob, you deserve a piece of pie.
I deserve a little piece of pie. I get some pie now.
This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for.
Fantastic.
I mean,
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we went all the way around the world and talked about so many interesting things. I mean, birth to death and ancestors and.
We hit some of the big ones.
Oh my gosh, Rob! I can't wait to talk with the rest of the Hawks over the course of the next few weeks. And this was really, really fun to connect with you, and I can't wait to see you guys play again in person.
Yeah, same here. I can't wait till we get to hang out in the real world. But thanks so much. It was really, really a pleasure to chat with you for an hour.
Yeah, likewise. Before you go, is there anything in particular that I'm trying to use the show, I'm trying to remember always to help people, whoever might be listening, know how to be a good music-loving citizen. I think that it's really confusing nowadays. Like, oh, well, I can stream music for free, so how exactly do I support the artists that I love? And so I'm wondering, for you, what is the best way for people to support you? Do you have any particular way, anything that you're promoting right now, or any particular way that you would like folks to be able to support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that the best way to support bands is kind of the old-fashioned way, is to buy their music. Like buy their music, or a T-shirt or whatever. Like how, in terms of supporting a band in a financial way, and people can do that at our website icehawks.com, or our Bandcamp, or Bandcamp is a place where people can actually pay for music, which I think is good and helpful and important. Other ways, just listen. Listen to us other places. Even if it's free, that's if that's the way to connect to it, do that. And come see us live. Come say hello. We play it. We're out there, and would love to meet you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rob. That was awesome. Yay.
Okay, thank you.
You stay right there. I'm gonna.
Okay.
I had a guest a while ago. She was like, "Do this thing," and I don't really know how to do it very well. Not that coordinated. So I'm just gonna go.
Okay.
Tweak. There we go. And that was Rob Waller from See Hawks in L.A., of course. What a great conversation. So cool that next week and the week after, and then a few weeks after that, we're going to have the rest of the band periodically through. The last week of February, I have a pre-recorded segment with Steve Key, another songwriter who is not from See Hawks in L.A. And so it's going to be just a really fun few weeks. I'm really excited about all of this. Please do listen to them. Whatever streaming platform you listen to, make sure that you heart or like or follow or whatever it is if you do use streaming platforms. And if you like to purchase music, of course, you can find them on iTunes or Bandcamp. Bandcamp, by the way, he gave a shout out for that, is a great platform, very supportive of artists. Buy t-shirts, all of that stuff. So if you're interested in finding out more about me or Tomes and Tunes, the past archives, you can find all of that at my website or my Linktree URL that's scrolling across the screen down there. And of course, please find my music wherever you listen to music as well. Join my mailing list, my Patreon, whatever it is in any way. I appreciate all the support. So thank you for listening, and come back next week for a new episode. Until then, take good care.